Welcome to another Fluid Webinar Series event. We're very excited today. We have Better Brand Building, and we have some great guests with us. Mark Hurst is joining us today. We're very, very excited about this. And so quickly, I'll just have each of the presenters do an introduction of themselves. You guys all know me. I'm Dustin Cederholm. I'm Fluid's digital marketing strategist. I'm almost coming up on my 1-year mark here with Fluid, but I've had over 7 years experience with brand building and more directly conversion marketing. And so I lead the digital team on the Fluid side. And then along with me from the Fluid team, we also have Phil Case on the line. Phil, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I've been with Fluid for well over 7 years now, and I'm excited to be able to have the opportunity to continue to present these monthly topics. Not only does it give us an opportunity to share the volumes of experience that we've had with numerous clients over the years, but even to sharpen our own skills and really be making sure that we're seeing what others are doing around the country and hopefully presenting valuable content to each of you. And I'm grateful to be a part of this and to have Mark with us as well.
Absolutely. Mark, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, thank you. So is everybody looking at this presentation?
They should be.
So the first thing I want to say is Phil Case is not that skinny, so he's been compressed, and I am not that fat. I've been stretched. This is ruining my brand image. That's not what I look like, sort of. Sorry to criticize your work there, but just wanted to say that. I don't have this, like, huge noggin as portrayed there.
We'll in our Friday email send out a proper picture of Mark so you can see the beauty firsthand.
Good luck with that. I run an organization called Connect Partners. It's been operating for about 10 years. It is primarily a brand strategy consulting group, and we support the capital community. My clients are actually venture capitalists and their portfolio companies, and they're struggling to either take a company to market, a brand new company, or a growth company that's pivoting and needs more customers. And so I get paid actually by venture capital type groups who hire me to help fix companies and launch companies and that sort of thing. So I'm not an ad agency guy. I own and operated the Hurst Group in Salt Lake for 20 years, sold it to a Silicon Valley firm, and became director of brand strategy for DDB, an Omnicom shop, one of the largest agency groups in the world, and commuted to San Francisco for 5 years, and happy to be on, and I live and breathe brand strategy. That's how I make my living.
That's awesome. Sounds like we have the right people online today. I think you're all in for a really great treat. Let's do a little housekeeping. As always, you can find us on Twitter, #FluidWebinarSeries. You can find our individual brands at Get Fluid and at Hurst Connect as well. We will be live tweeting with our hashtag from the Get Fluid profile. So if you guys have any questions or just want to make any comments, include those, and we will be sure to engage with you. Let's go ahead and just get started. First of all, we want to discuss what is a brand? How do you define your brand, and how do you build it from the inside out? The Wikipedia, very official definition of corporate branding, refers to the practice of promoting the brand name of corporate entity as opposed to specific products and services. And I think throughout this presentation we may touch on some services and products, and you might be able to parallel a few of these things into products and services, but for the most part we're going to be talking more of the corporate brand, the umbrella brand, where all the products and services kind of fall under. The activities are a little bit different for corporate branding from the product and service aspect of it, and the scope is obviously a lot more broad. And so we will kind of look a little bit more closely at this graphic on your right-hand side to see some of the 3 different groups that make up branding. And before I go into that, I think this is a great time. Mark has so much experience in all of this, and I'd like to pass it over to him. He has, I believe it's the V8.
Yeah, this is really an interesting slide. It gives you a sense of all the moving parts of a brand. It speaks, I think, to the brand execution, this model. Before you do that, there has to be a brand discovery. You have to really figure these things out, and I found that you have to really go digging for it. I have literally done dozens and dozens of brand engagements, and the first thing clients start out telling me is their mission vision statement. And after I've cleaned up the vomit, throwing up from mission vision statements that all sound exactly the same, you have to dig down and really find out what the meaning of a brand is before you can hope to successfully execute it. Let me take literally about 60 seconds and tell you these V8s, each of these things start with the letter V, so I just call it my V8 engine.
And right before you do that, I'm just going to go to the next slide. You guys get a bit bigger view of what we're talking about, but I think Mark is going to take us prior to even this slide.
Yeah, so I think that I've just got a clever way of thinking about human behavior and about positioning in the marketplace. You might find this a helpful thing as you do the discovery of what a brand strategy might be. The first one is values. Companies have to stand for something. This is an internal look at your brand. Dustin's going to talk about employees and all those sorts of things later on who are expressions of your brand. But companies have to stand for something. You have to figure out who you are. It's an internal look at your brand. The second V is value proposition. That's the external way. It's what you promise to users over and over. Great brands have promises that you know and understand. The third one is a vision, what it is that you transform or disrupt. People want to know what the brand does for them. With Nike, people see themselves as being fit. The vision was to change the world of athletic apparel and that sort of thing. So the third V is vision. The fourth is an interesting one. I call it the vector. This is where needs meet wants. You can understand, if you have a product or a service, you understand what people need, and you probably are addressing that with toothpaste or mouthwash or a car or something needs. But when you can convert that into a want, when people really want it, you've created an interesting nexus. So it's called a vector. V number 5 is the voice. This is I call it the tone, voice, and personality of the brand. Great brands have a personality to them. You see it in Apple Computer's marketing efforts. It is the same since they incorporated it. It looks the same, and you understand it. You understand what the Coca-Cola brand is. There's a tone of voice, and you have to find it and identify it and be true to it over time. Number 6 is what I call a vibe. It's really being relevant in the lives of people. It's just another word for a vibe. The German word Zeitgeist is about everything that's happening, the current sort of vibe. Tap into it. Great brands understand it. Some brands mature and have to sort of change their vibe a little bit with products, but they never change their tone of voice and their personality. Number 7 is the most important one that I started talking about, and I call it visceral. You have to make a visceral connection. The word viscera means your internal organs. That's where it came from. So if you make it, it's more than making an emotional connection. I can fall in love with products or services. I can make an emotional connection. But I'm not brand loyal until I internalize the brand. Make connections with people and they internalize it. We can talk some more about that with some examples. And the final one is visual. Notice that it's the very last thing at the end of my V's. There you have V8, and the last one is visual. So a logo is not a brand, it is not a tagline, it is not typography, it is not even your advertising messages, even though this slide that's up is somewhat about the story and going to market with things. It is not the visual. The visual barely helps you connect to the previous 7 V's in it. Helps me be reminded of my connection to the brand. That was a lot. I went over 60 seconds, Dustin, but there you go. There's the V8 approach to what really makes up a brand and how you find it.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. I hope all of you guys out there were listening closely to Mark right there. I can't tell you how many times as an agency we have companies come to us and say, we want to do a rebrand. What can you do with my logo? And they are not starting at the right point at all. And oftentimes when we start getting into these questions that Mark addresses with the V8, they don't have those answers. And so we really encourage you to strategize a brand.
Just real quick, Dustin, I was asked to rebrand probably the largest venture capital fund in Utah. I won't give away their name, but it's the largest venture capital fund here in this state and around the region. And they called me and said, we want to change our name. Can you come and do that? And I said, no, I don't do naming. He said, well, you did another fund and you did their name. Well, yeah, but a name is an outgrowth of what all the things you stand for. And if you can't tell me what you stand for and the things I just outlined for you, or why you're changing, then just go ahead and pick a name, and anything will work if you don't stand for something. So we went through a deep dive on who they were, came up with some great things. They're highly successful. We changed their name in the end, changed their website and all the expressions of the brand. But I said, I don't change names. I don't change logos. Anybody can do that unless there's a real important reason what your change is trying to do, and without violating the promise you make to your customers. So it's all intertwined. It's not a logo. It's not a tagline.
Absolutely. I think this next slide speaks a little bit to that, and as we've been talking, it almost sounds as though there's a missing ring, and for me, that ring would be around the corporate brand circle you see here, and that should probably be another with people and probably internal employees, where you're really getting your company to understand what is the new brand, why are we doing it, what's the purpose, how to internalize that message, so that when you go to market, you are actually delivering a different product rather than the same thing under a different name.
I love the slide. I'm doing a brand engagement right now, and it's very small, and it's a commercial refrigeration company. Doesn't sound really glamorous. I work on global brands down in San Francisco, but they need some help, and 100% of this is going to be about people. Your circle of people are on the edge. In the end, the only thing they have, they sell refrigeration from some other manufacturer. It's a commodity. Everybody else does exactly the same thing, and the only thing they have is their people on the front lines who know more about refrigeration inside a 7-Eleven than the owner or the manager of the store does. They're preemptive. They go in, they tell you it's time to change your filters and that sort of thing. We're building a new brand around their people. Sounds trite, sounds cliche. They don't have anything else. So I love the way this slide integrates people who execute on the brand.
And along those lines, as we talk about what a brand represents, the people both internally and externally, one of the best demonstrations of that, I recently spent some time with Pluralsight's CEO. They're a major technology company that has received very large valuations, and they're kind of gobbling up other smaller players in a lot of acquisitions as of late. But, you know, as they talk about what their brand means to them, they ask some pretty fundamental questions to their team, their people, their, customer base, which is, why do we exist as a company? Can we explain that to each other, why we even exist? And then how do we behave here? What are our values? How do we work with each other? What do we actually do? And then what's, for us as a business, what are we trying to communicate at, and what value do we present to the marketplace? And so as you think about that, I think some of the litmus tests there is not just saying this is who we are and how we define ourselves, but going and asking all of your employees down to the new intern that just started, going to your customer base and asking some of those harder questions of, do you know why we exist? What we do, what value do we provide? And that's usually a good primer for getting some, I think, pretty good feedback relative to, are you on the mark? Have you asked the right questions that kind of Mark already spoke on? Or is there some work to do that, can help really bring some alignment there?
Absolutely agree with you. And you guys might be able to talk maybe more specifically to some of these, but I think these epitomize how these companies have really built a brand, so much so that they represent a state, and they represent a lot more than just a company at this point. They're household names, and you can probably give them their value prop back to them, which really just shows not only have they internalized it, but how well they've done on the external side as well. So we do have to talk about unveiling the brand and get into some of it, but I think if there's anything to really take away, it's that this is probably your later steps and is far less important than the true strategy behind it all. Not that it's not important, but just making sure that you have the right strategy before you begin will make the biggest difference as you start to take it to market. And so we wanted to just go through a few of the things that are essential for a brand. Most of you guys know what these are. This is your website. If you don't have a website nowadays, you probably don't exist as a company. And if you don't have a good one, that can make a lot of the difference too. What is the performance score? How fast does it load? What is the user experience from desktop to mobile? There are so many things to really consider with your website. To make a good one is critical for you, and is probably one of the most major starting points anybody's going to go to find out more about you, to learn about your brand, and then to develop the trust that eventually leads to making that purchase or acquiring your services. The other things, just real quickly, obviously Facebook, major social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Email is a huge one. And then a lot of the ones that most everybody can really start is just having a blog. A great way to distribute content, distribute opinions, and to pull in some of your clients or your vendors and get their opinions and start to build off of a network. And so your blog is a great place to utilize that as well. For the most part, I think when we say the essentials of brand, you all know what these are in your minds, and it's, comes back to that logo, comes back to your collateral, everything that you think of as a brand. Those are the essentials. You have to have them, and there's so many great companies out there able to advise you on how to do it. But again, let's start with the strategy before you move into any of these. So anything else you guys would add as far as essentials to brand? Bill, Mark?
I think that's the heart of it. I'll have a couple thoughts back on that in just a moment.
Yep, we'll get to that. Let's go through a couple of the, kind of niche social media channels that we've been keeping an eye on. We do these webinars once a month, as you guys know at this point, and we've talked about Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so we wanted to kind of take a look at some of these up-and-coming social media platforms. Not that YouTube is up-and-coming, but it's probably underutilized, if nothing else. And so just real quickly to go over a few of them. In my opinion, Mark, Phil, you guys feel free to weigh in on this, but I think video is the single most powerful content medium that you can be utilizing right now. I say that because beyond meme or infographic or blog, picture, whatever it is, you get to hear a person's voice, you get to look in their eyes, you get to see the motion of that. And there's just so much of a personal connection between video. And the amount of information you can distribute in such a short amount of time, video just to me seems like the best platform of all. And people just aren't utilizing it. I think they're scared of it. I think that they think that it's expensive. There's just a number of reasons why people aren't using YouTube. And I sit here as somebody who runs a nonprofit privately, and just as a digital marketing strategist, I could probably overcome most of those challenges that you have. It's not all that pricey. A small investment can really lead to a lot of great content and your ability to create videos. And there's some free editing programs out there that you can utilize, and so most of the reasons why we're not using them can be overcome fairly simply. And so I would really strategize with your team, how can you start to build these in? All those reasons plus the SEO factors of it. I don't know, Phil, Mark, do you guys have anything to say?
Yeah,
well, Rustin and I were chatting here before we started this about the phenomenon of social media. I think that I've been at this racket 35 years or even more than that, and I've never seen such changes. Of course, that's what a gray-haired guy's supposed to say. And the way it's changed the way we communicate with people. I grew up in the advertising world when it was one-to-many. We created a TV commercial, and if you ran in the Super Bowl, 40 million people saw it. One-to-many. It is such a dead model. Still people running TV advertising and radio and all the things. But it's all about one-to-one. Gone are the days of one-to-many, and it is one-to-one, and it's peer-to-peer. And Dustin was saying, we go looking for things in a social way. It goes well beyond even what we're looking for, what we're shopping for. We have people who curate content for us and help us discover new songs, new musical groups, new clothing lines, new fads, new trends. And we rely on social media for the way we used to rely on a television commercial to tell us what's new and exciting and hip and important to buy. So this is one of the most important things a brand strategist has to deal with. The reality, branding has never been more important in history, ever, because we have to talk to people intimately, one-on-one, and we have to have brand evangelists. That's what happens with YouTube and Pinterest and those sort of things. So people are talking about it. Word of mouth Peer-to-peer communications has never been more important as an element, as a tool of successful branding.
And just coupled with that, so not as much on the social side that Mark spoke of, but I love video that Dustin spoke about originally as a medium, because it's such a powerful capturing multiple sensories where not only visually you can show forth a graphic, but when you add audio to that, people usually don't misunderstand what your intended message was. So you can not only show them visually what you're thinking and how you want to brand and present yourself and your message, but then the audio following up and the music and the emotion involved. I don't know of a more powerful medium by which a brand can truly somewhat control the message. And what's neat about it is not only can it be shared and be viral and social and the peer-to-peer, as Mark spoke about, and trusting others. So when somebody sends me a video and says, hey, you got to check this out, I'm relying, one, on their recommendation and saying, okay, my friend sent me this, so there must be something here. And that's already done, that brand in my mind has already gone up a notch or two. But then the brand still gets to control the message. Basically, because the video and how it's produced really does a great job of captivating my attention. So I do like that as a powerful medium. It can't be done for everything that you do all of the time, nor would it make sense. But I do think that that's one of the stronger forays that we see a lot of brands just either can't afford or don't budget for or don't really understand the powerful medium it can be.
And Phil, as I said, I think branding has never been more important than it is today. And I think that video has to play this role. Creativity has never been more important. I've wondered in the ad agency world, and some of the folks who might be listening today who are marketing people, how they stay relevant and interesting. And creativity has never been more important, because if you nail a good YouTube video, and it's fun and creative, it not only helps drive your brand strategy and create word of mouth and create kind of an emotional bond, but people remember it and they evangelize it. It's free for people to evangelize it. So get creative, get funky, get out there, stretch your imagination, and make your videos really, really interesting. Be creative. It's never been more important.
Absolutely. And, I mean, even further on that, you can make money if you do it right. And so beyond your own service and your whole brand, you do a good YouTube video, you'll be getting paid through that as well. So, yeah, I think YouTube is just a great channel. Pinterest is another really huge opportunity that we're watching people move towards, especially the world of, you know, the women and the youth ages. But one of the really interesting things we're finding on Pinterest is that it's a largely growing audience of 50 plus. And so you can go from the younger youth groups to the older demographic and find them on a new social channel that you might have individual access to, where some of the other brands within your field aren't utilizing this. And so you can kind of get in early on, build that network, and become that influencer within your space or that thought leader within your space. And so being able to take advantage of these, if you have the right demographic, would be a fantastic opportunity, while the rest of the world isn't, you know, climbing all over themselves. They're going to get there, no doubt. And so time is of the essence, I would say. Instagram, right before, just Pinterest also has the Buy It Now button. And so you can turn e-commerce directly into Pinterest now. Instagram, another really fantastic social media platform that not everybody is utilizing. It's a great platform for reaching urban audiences of all races. And so where a lot of the social media platforms are white-dominated, Instagram is not, and it has a large group of African-American and Hispanic demographic. So it's just really incredible who is seeing these posts on which social media channel and how that might match up with your demographic where other people aren't really recognize it, and you can jump into that. And then lastly, Snapchat. Snapchat's probably the most frightening thing I've ever come across. Not a parent, but as an uncle, I don't know how it all works. I'm a little confused by it, of course, and what people are sharing, but it's a fantastic avenue for advertisers, and the age group 18 to 24 are just basically starting to enter the adult world, starting to have income, really defining what brands they're going to be following, and your ability to capture them on Snapchat will roll over into all the other social platforms and eventually roll back onto your website. And so Snapchat offers a fantastic opportunity for you to get in early and really make your brand known to a group that could follow you throughout their entire lives. Do you guys have anything else to share on social channels? We'll go ahead and move on. And just briefly touch on online reviews. On the left-hand side here, I've listed a number of different review sites that you can use. Some are local to Utah for our Utah audience, and others are more national. But reviews are one of the fastest growing mediums for you to improve SEO, gain a larger portion of the search page. So when you're searching, they're actually pulling up your reviews. It's taking up more of the landscape that is available. And in general, back to Mark's point, it's a one-to-one environment. And so people trust other people. And so they want your opinion, and that's really going to be huge towards making a purchase or securing a new service. And so if you don't have a current review or referral program in place, I highly suggest you look at doing one. It can be as easy as an exit survey on an e-commerce, or if it's an annual client survey that you're sending. There's many different ways to collect these, but I would suggest collecting them and aggregating. The bottom three there, Bazaar Voice, Shopper Approved, and Needle, are services that you can subscribe to help you get reviews and referrals. If you haven't looked into them, I would suggest you do. Needle is probably the more progressive one for brand advocates, and that's where you actually have somebody, if I were an interested party in your product, I could talk directly to a brand advocate who would tell them all about the product I was going to buy, and it's a live chat session. It's really incredible. So it takes this, the untrusted picture of a person with the short quote and then their name, which we all kind of think, is that made up? Did they fabricate that? To actually directly speaking with an individual and having a one-to-one conversation with them. So here's a couple of valuable resources I think you guys could utilize, and I suggest looking into those if you have that kind of business model. And the last one is PR and influencers. We've touched on this throughout, but I think, as you go to market with a brand, everybody thinks of sending that first press release of the rebrand or the new brand. And there's just so many different ways to do this that I would almost just say that you really need to figure out who are those people in your space that you're following. And can you utilize them to help them distribute your message, or can you pull them in on a webinar, pull them in for a guest blog to basically grow each of your networks? There's a number of great strategies in this area. I wonder, Phil, do you have any specific examples of how this is used? Kind of putting Phil on the spot here, apologize.
No, it's interesting as you look at that, and that's often, I was with a client on Friday, and we were having a conversation around granite countertops sales, and they said, what more can we do to influence an audience? So their audience specifically is defined as women between the ages of about 30 to 50 that have some discretionary income, married, of course, with wanting to redo their homes, their kitchens, kind of upgrade, remodel, and being able to make an investment of those sorts. And they said, really what we're trying to communicate, it's not just a slab of granite or marble or countertop. It's about what you're creating. It's putting, the heart in the home. It's allowing you to really make the kitchen where everybody spends their time over the holidays together and creates all of those family experiences. It's putting that as a priority. And they said when we sit down with couples, men and women, they immediately get it and be able to resonate with that. But how do we use and leverage those who are very much within that influencing space of that audience? So we began to talk about, there's several here locally and nationally of women that have really been successful in being the shopping, the bloggers, the dress, the clothing, the home. And it's interesting, even on Instagram, my wife follows, Real Houses of IG of Instagram, and where they go and take a tour of homes every day, and they take pictures of it, and they relate that to, hey, here's some ideas, here's what you ought to be looking at. These are moments of inspiration that you can kind of draw on. My wife looks at that, and is constantly kind of documenting and getting ideas. And so for a brand to take advantage of somebody like that, where they're able to, from an influence perspective, reach out to them to say, you know, we have an excellent product, it resonates well with your niche marketplace. Can you get us in front of and help promote XYZ type of product or service, because this audience is going to love it, and, you know, craft the right message and creative, as Mark said. That's paramount now because people don't like anything that isn't authentic. But being able to partner with somebody like that, and, you know, there's several here that have, you know, 500,000 followers, where quite easily you can reach that audience and do so quickly. Another quick note, there's a good friend of mine that started a subscription bow company where they make bows for little girls. And so, again, they're reaching that same, you know, kind of mom audience. And part of their strategy, their organic growth strategy, has been getting in front of social influencers, those that have followings, those that are influential in that particular demographic on social media. And it doesn't take more than just a handful of posts of saying, hey, I you know, subscribe to this service. My daughter, you know, we get all of our bows from there. We get 3 a month. This is how much it costs. It's a great service. You know, check it out app. And they've seen their sales double every month for the last 4 months. And they are now, you know, after starting 4 months later, have 650 customers that are reoccurring revenue. And they use those organic social word-of-mouth channels by tapping those, you know, peer influencers, and that was key for them.
Absolutely, and I think we've seen that with a number of clients. So, but it's also one of the more underutilized areas. I think it's new, but we have a blog on our site if you want more information about this, and it's just talking about how to reach out to influencers and engage with them, which I think would be valuable to all those on. Let's move on to the next one. If you had something there, we can kind of address as we keep going. But let's move into rebranding, and we'll touch on this real briefly, and then we will get into our real-life example and where we might actually just talk more about rebranding. And so I'm going to turn this over to Mark. I think with all your experience, you can probably speak well to this. There's the 1 through 5 on this slide. I wonder if that V8 isn't actually more appropriate for this.
Let me give the audience just a little bit more meat on this. I've learned a lot listening to this, you guys, so I appreciate this because social media is very complex to me, and I understand its reality. I again want to go backwards and talk about where brands begin. I'm going to tell you about the state of Utah in just a minute, but I want to just give you one other real quick example because I've worked on a very interesting piece of business. It's called Spoonful of Comfort, and they sell soup. And the woman who founded it lost her mother to cancer. And she wanted to do for her mother what her mother always did for her. She wanted to send her some chicken soup. And she loved the idea of making chicken soup. And so she got online and looked for companies that sell chicken soup to send to a friend, and there weren't any. It just had never happened. One of those things that never happened. And part of the reason it never happened is because chicken is actually very tricky. You have to have FDA inspectors on site. When you make chicken soup, you have to have a commercial kitchen, and it has to be go through a rigorous process before you could ship it across state lines. And, of course, keeping it fresh and those things, it doesn't matter. This is a story of rebranding it. We call it Spoonful of Comfort, which is really a good name, and it was all about the soup. It was all about the soup and how yummy it tastes and how good it is, and what a great gift item it is to receive soup in the mail. So they sell a package with soup and rolls and cookies and a ladle, and it's in a cool box. You can look it up online. It's Spoonful of Comfort. And they got some real traction. They sold a lot of soup, and then it went flat. It just stagnated. And they hired me to rebrand, to pivot, to pivot. We didn't do very much to change their logo. We didn't do very much to change colors, or all those things that I've said. But we started talking to women, and they allowed us to talk to some customers who were repeat customers. And we found a moment of genius when we discovered what women were really telling us. And it is, if you live away from somebody, you want to send them a spoonful of comfort. You want to send something comfort. And if you were right next door, you would take it over to them. You would nurture them, And the learning in our discovery process was women yearn to nurture. We wrote that on a whiteboard, and it may not sound like this big epiphany to any of you. It was to this company. Women who yearn to nurture. And we were able to find sites and PR and social media, and we changed everything about the brand. Of course it's about soup. It's a very unique gift, but it was more about the experience of a woman being able to do something for a friend when she's sick, when she's having a baby, when someone's lost a loved one, send it to a student who's living in a dorm on their birthday. When women can't be there to hold your hand and pat it, they yearn to nurture. And ladies, any of you who are listening, that's why we love you. You cannot help it. You cannot help. Men don't get it. They don't have a clue. By the way, they're doing well with corporate gifting, but it's sending sick people. Women totally connect with that brand, and it taught us exactly who they need to be. We did a visual redo. It's all new and different. They're doing extremely well. It's a cool story, and when we found that one learning about who our customer was, what makes them tick, and how to internalize it, I talked about in one of the V's, it really turned this company around. They're really doing great things. Look for those single sort of definitions of who you really are, what you really do, and connect with your audience at a visceral level. That's how to rebrand. You can't rebrand until you've really done it.
I think you've heard some branding genius right there, and it seems to me it almost just starts with that number one, create a story. So many times we get caught up in our features and not our benefits in marketing, and that is probably one of the single easiest things to change. When you stop talking about you and your product and talk about your solution and how it works within the lives of the people you're trying to attract. Continuous change.
It is a story. There's a line from a BMW spot just recently. I didn't think they were defining branding, but it was just in a spot, and I heard it, and I wrote it down. And it says this: at BMW, we learned a long time ago that what you make people feel is just as important as what you make. So going to the point of number one, create a story. You have to make people feel comfortable, feel emotional, feel connected to it. So it's not about what you make, it's what you make people feel. That's the best definition of branding I've ever heard.
That's awesome. Phil, did you have something?
You know, it's interesting that as you present your brand and your story and that corporate message you're seeking to get out, always remember it's never about you. You're not the hero of the story that you're trying to present. It's not that you swoop in and, you know, all eyes on you. It's always about customer. It's always about those that you're servicing. They're the hero. They're the main character, the antagonist. You're merely to be there as a guide, help present a solution, and help them see a better future, but never take the focus and eyes off of how do you directly impact their life, remove the pain that they're experiencing, and be able to look forward to a brighter future.
That's fantastic. That's great. I mean, in your story, what character do you play? That's good stuff. I think, you know, it's just fantastic, everything going on. And so I think we're lucky we get to move into the next step here, which is just the real-world example. We're going to turn most of the time over here to Mark to talk about his experiences with a specific brand, and I'll let him introduce it and just lay it all out the way that he did it. So the floor is yours, Mark.
Thanks. This will be fun. I'll have to be quick. We're running just a little short on time.
I was going to mention we have hit kind of our mark, but I think that there's so much value going on here. I say we go 15 minutes here, and then we'll follow up with Q&A if you guys want.
If the audience wants to do that, that's fine. I'll try to be really brief, but it's a very compelling story, I think, and it was my privilege to be able to work on rebranding the state of Utah. There have been a number of different brands, and those of us who live here know what it is. You could articulate it as well as I could. After the Olympics, it was thought that the Olympics would brand us. The fact is there is no halo from the Olympics. The Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City branded the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. It did not brand the state of Utah. There was not an enduring sense of what the brand was. When Governor Huntsman took office, the hallmark of his administration was economic development and growth and tourism. The legislature passed a $50 million budget. Agencies from all over the country came and pitched the business. Most of the local agencies here, of course, everybody wanted a $50 million piece of business. I was fortunate enough to win that RFP, and the competition for it. I won it. First thing we did was put into practice many of the things we've been talking about here. We had to really know who our audience was, and we had to know what the core, the essence of this was, make it resonant with people who come to visit here. So we did that by getting in a van and driving all over the state of Utah. We had about a 14-city listening tour. Took months. We would do focus groups in London and 8 or 9 major markets here in the United States. We spent the first 6 months, when you, something high stakes like that, you go listen to your audience, listen to the industry, listen to the stakeholders in Utah, the mom and pop bed and breakfast inns, the restaurants, the car rental agencies. We gathered them together and had a listening tour. In Park City and Salt Lake City and Provo, we filled the hotel rooms, 200, 300, 400 people, because everybody was interested. This is how they make their living. They are the brand, the people who do these things. They represent the ski resorts and the national parks. Everybody was there. It was fantastic opportunity to go meet these kind of groups. The very last tour, about 3 months later, 14 cities later, we're in Kanab, Utah. And by the way, the Salt Lake Tribune would report that we were having a logo or a slogan contest, which we never did. But I did ask people to tell me in one sentence, what do you think is the story of Utah? What is the essence of a brand? And I asked people for that, and we got a lot of submissions. So the Tribune said they're just having the public do it for them, and we took a lot of heat for that. None of that was ever true. But we did listen. And in Kanab, final pit stop, it's late summer and it's hot. I was kind of tired of talking and all this stuff. And there was, and as I said, we had big crowds everywhere. In Kanab, we had 7 people. And it seemed like it was kind of a bust. Well, that's all there is in Kanab. And so there's our 7 people. I'm trying to be a cheerleader and rally the enthusiasm. Tell me what this is. And a guy raises his hand, and I said, please, tell me what you think this ought to be about. And he told me the following story. This is 100% true. I'm now sort of paraphrasing what he told me. This is his story. He said, I have a friend from the East. This guy wasn't even from Kanab. He was from somewhere else. His friend is from the East, and he said, my friend and I go hiking every year. He comes out, and he loves Utah. He loves hiking here, and we'll go to the backcountry. And he said, one evening, my friend and I sat on a cliff at the Kodachrome Basin. As the sun was setting, it paints these canyon walls, all these oranges, and it's really a spectacular place if you haven't been there. 2 guys on a cliff watching the sunset. His friend from the East turned to him and said, I want you to know something. At this moment, I'm almost not an atheist. And I said, that's what you think the brand of Utah is? And this guy said, I do. And I said, I think I agree with you. And that moment of epiphany began to summarize the thousands of other things that I heard. It's not about what you see when you come to Utah, it's about what you feel. And I would do a lot of research, and I would discover that most people promoting, this is interesting, this is not a product, this is not a service, it's a destination. It's unique in all the world, and it's a unique spot in all the world. And people would begin, my research would show that people were talking about post 9/11, this was exactly the timing, that people don't go on vacations to see sights. They go on vacations to have their eyes opened. I wrote that line as a summary of everything. Traveling is about an experience. It is about an emotion. And we have to tap into that emotional component, talk to people all over the country about why they should come to Utah. And as we travel the state, it occurs to me that wherever you go in Utah, and whatever you do in terms of recreation, there's a sense of elevation. We're surrounded, I call it framed by high peaks. You're sitting right here, you can look out your window and see the mountains out your back window. Or if you're on top of a peak, you're looking down at it and you're terrified of stepping off that lift at Snowbird or Alta. And it was an elevating experience. And it was not an elevation of just topography or geography, but it became an elevation of the senses, an elevation of the spirit, an elevation of the soul, and you live here or you leave here with a sense of elevation by the experiences that you have. We proposed it, went through all of the kind of lengthy approval process of a governor, a legislature, a travel tourism board, directors, and the stakeholders. We had to rally everybody around it. And when we found that, and by the way, I didn't find it, it found us. That guy in Kanab started by telling us, it was not about what I'm sitting here seeing, it's what I'm experiencing at that moment. And it's a brand. It's the essence, it's the core of a brand. It is the story, it is the zeitgeist, it is about relevance and resonance. We put it to work and we execute it around Life Elevated. If you're in Utah and you're listening to this, you have it on your license plate. Tragically, you don't see much of it because we don't promote it much here in the state. It's all out of state. And we have to go compete against Colorado for skiers. We have to compete against Arizona for hiking in the Red Rocks and national parks. And by any measure, it's been a phenomenal hit. I haven't worked on the account now for a number of years. I'm not boasting about it. I'm telling you how we found the essence of a brand that is unique in all the world, because it's neither a product nor a service. It's kind of a destination, and people have to do their own things here. We fought the battles between snow and Red Rocks. It was never about the snow. It was never about the products. It was never about our features. It was about how unbelievably compelling an experience in Utah is. That's the best story I have, Dustin, Phil, about how to build a brand and how to pivot, how to reestablish a brand. Everything else, there's a style guide, you get co-op dollars, all of the things on that first slide was about executing on it. It's been a very, very good thing for the state, who realized probably, I think it's somewhere between $10 and $12 returns to the state coffers for every dollar they spend. They have spent about $50 million or more in those ensuing years, and they get about $12 back on it. That's the best brand story I've got.
Wow, talk about a success. And I have to say, Mark's here in the office with me. I feel honored just to get to hear this story and listen to that process.
I'm looking Dustin in the eye as we have this conversation. He's an audience of one. I assume there's listeners there. So.
There are, but it is just absolutely fantastic. Phil, do you want to add anything there? And we may have lost Phil, but I will say to Mark's point here that I just got back from Disneyland actually, and I did a quick weekend trip, and the Disneyland obviously is a brand that has infiltrated our lives to every core almost, and I go there and we can walk as a group. We're about 12 of us, and five kids under the age of 5, and so we walk about 30 feet before we stop again, have to buy something, do something, or we're all just yelling at us. And as I looked around, the reality of the feelings we were having were frustration, crying, anger, all kinds of very negative emotions. I end up on the flight coming home, and I look over at my girlfriend, and we just start reciting all the amazing things that happened and how much fun Disneyland was and this incredibly great experience, which was so opposite of the reality of how we did it.
The bad moments went away.
But the brand is there, and the feeling really is there for just those moments of joy. And I may be kind of jumping around a little.
No, it's one of the great branding stories of all time because they know that feeling. Their brand playbook is about magical moments that take you away. And they do it in spades, and everything that they do, every outward expression of the brand reeks of that authentic brand story.
And it's what I'm attached with, you know, even though I almost had contrary events, I'm still attached to how amazing and magical it really was. And I will remember the vacation very fondly, which seems so odd, but I think that's the power of a well-defined brand. And I'm sure for that same person in Kanab sitting on the hill, that they will look to that, as I have with other vacations, the same way. We're almost in I feel like I saw some type of spiritual event.
No, I think you're spot on. That's the story of Utah and Life Elevated and what it means. I've had an absolute ball telling it to people around the state now.
And I just wanted to dovetail on what Dustin said. I had a good friend of mine that, I just want to cue off the Disneyland thing. He was actually at Disney World, had his entire family, all of his children and grandchildren, an audience of about 20. He had purchased 5-day passes for them in the park. He said it was day 2, and he said that it was about halfway through the day, and they were pretty frustrated. He said we couldn't get on the rides we wanted. It was overcrowded. He said the fast passes were gone so quickly. And he said we just weren't having the experience that we expected, that the brand, Disney, had projected when you come and, you know, the memories you'll be making. So he walked in to the customer service area and just unloaded on this poor lady. And he said she just patiently listened for about 5 minutes. And at the very end, he said she didn't try to directly, at least in that point, address all of my concerns at once. She simply asked a single question, which is, what experience are you hoping to have at Disney World today? What experience would you and your family like to have? And that was it. And he said it immediately shifted the paradigm from the negative to a positive. He began to describe what they had hoped to do. He walked out of there a few minutes later, armed with more fast passes, you know, and other things. But he said it was just interesting how Disney recognized the frustration that can happen. And we should know that our brand will be tainted at times. We won't always have a positive experience. And some things are out of our control, but if we always consistently say what experience are we hoping the brand to give people as they interact with us, and when there isn't that positive experience that they were hoping for, how do we immediately come back to that vision, those brand values, that benefit statement that we talked about earlier that we're hoping to project, and begin to turn the conversation and, you know, help people understand that. So I think that's kind of more the brand and execution. Once you do nail it and figure it out, how do we continue to keep that same brand experience and consistency? And it really comes down to our people and training and helping them, you know, to give our customers the best experience possible.
Absolutely. I think it's amazing. It's a great story all around, and I think there's a lot for all of those listening out there to think about. How can you impart some of that emotion and feeling to the people that you're attempting to attract? We're pretty much at our time, and so we will quickly go over branding mistakes. I don't know if in 1 or 2 minutes you could give us a quick story, Mark.
I just think it's all about corporate buy-in. Everybody has to do it. So that woman at the desk at Disneyland is trained and bought into it. There are going to be mistakes. There's going to be a jar of soup with my client that got broken. I heard the CEO of Overstock recently speak, Jonathan Johnson. He's the chairman, maybe CEO of Overstock. And he said that they struggled as a company for many, many years. And they tried to fix it. When they had their growth spurt, they decided they had to fix it. It was only about customer service. Their brand, they were selling Overstock things, and it wasn't a particular thing. So the brand is only about customer service. And it didn't work very well. And they wrote a mantra for their internal stuff, and he said, it is about the customers having justice. And I thought, well, that's an interesting word. And it was no matter what went wrong, we fix it. They get justice. They expect to have the product they want at the price they want, delivered on time. And if they don't get it, nothing else matters, because we really don't sell anything unique to us. And so their mantra, their corporate brand internally, is about making sure the customer always has justice. And you can look at this list of common mistakes and all that sort of thing. Ultimately, just go fix it. Just, respond, be responsive, and give every customer justice. I thought that was I just heard that about a week ago. I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that as one of the things we always need to talk about.
Absolutely. And I think, Mark said it, mistakes do happen. Just address them. It's when we leave things open-ended that people really start to brood, and they will often take to social media or some other outlet to just make it so they feel heard. And if you can address those things, you can often turn negative into a positive in your response. And it sounds like that's what Overstock is going for 100%. We'll actually talk a little bit more about negative. It looks like we have a couple of questions about how to respond to reviews and some of those, and we'll get into that in a section, or into the next section. However, for now, I would just kind of take a look at this list, and if I were going to say one big mistake, it's that you didn't get the right strategy in place and you didn't distribute it to your culture.
Yeah.
If you do those two,
you get buy-in to your culture.
Buy-in to your culture, absolutely. You do that, and I think you'll have a winning brand, and whatever mistakes occur after are far more fixable. So Here's just a quick summary page for you guys, and there's a number of takeaways here. In all honesty, again, I think it comes back to how you begin the process and that you really look at what is it you're trying to achieve and do you have the right message going forward. This has nothing to do with your name, nothing to do with your logo. Those are all just outputs of what you're really trying to do, which is to create a different image in the mind of your consumer. And so there's a number of these. Feel free to follow through on these takeaways, but again, the starting point is just right strategy. So I'll go ahead. Phil, are you still with us?
I am.
I think Phil's got a hard deadline. We've kind of hit the time, so you going to jump off for the questions?
I'm happy if there's one that I can take before I go. That would be great.
Okay. Well, let's do brief questions. If Phil has to go throughout, we'll complete this. And again, this is recorded, so you guys can follow up on anything that you hear here that you want to execute. Our first question, and I think this is really easy, and we probably answered this, is just there's so much to focus on. What is the one simple thing I can do to help my brand? And actually help build my brand, excuse me. Phil, do you want to take that while we have you?
Yeah, so it's interesting for us, we typically talk with companies about how do we leverage the low-hanging fruit opportunities. And so I think it would be looking in the landscape of what you've done and say, first of all, what are some of the free mediums available? So building your brand comes down to what experience are you delivering every time somebody interacts with you or with the company or product or service. And that would be step number one. I mean, that is essentially a free medium that any time you're interacting with somebody and they're connecting that back to your brand or your company or, the name of your product, that is a great brand building experience. And so making sure that those are exceptional, that they're customer focused and benefit focused, and really helping, the employees and staff that you work with and others to deliver a consistent experience. I would say that's step number one. And step number two would be going in throughout your office and those that you work with and just simply polling them to say, in your words, what does our brand represent? Tell me, a couple of sentences, and just getting some feedback. And that is some very easy, kind of market research that you can do internally, getting some feedback from that, and then even whether it be a survey or as you interact with customers, just asking them to say, hey, we've been thinking a little bit about branding. Not sure, if we're going to try to do a rebrand or, invest some additional dollars there, but help us understand your perception of our company, your perception of what we provide, the value of our values. And really, I think just beginning dialogues from a free perspective of every experience that you deliver to customers, making it exceptional and helping the employees still resonate and, be on the same page with you on what your brand is. And then secondarily, your customers. And I think that those three things would provide high value before you start to invest a lot of marketing dollars, because that really helps you kind of rein in and define who you are and what you represent, and if there does need to be some refinement to some of the brand strategy.
Fantastic. And I think Mark here is probably chomping. I'm going to add another element to this, which I think you guys can kind of address. But another question that is similar is, should I rebrand? Our current brand doesn't seem to be effective. And maybe Mark can talk about, how to build the brand, but also if it's necessary.
Yeah. So I like both questions. So management or ownership of companies have to buy in to this. And I think that if the question is, should we rebrand, I don't have the faintest idea, and you don't either, until you ask the tough questions. You just go ask the tough questions. I'll tell you what I'll do. We didn't have a slide on the B8 thing. You can put it up as a blog post. I'm writing a book on B2B branding, so you guys, anybody can have this, and just go through those sets of questions. Do we really, really, really understand who we are, what we stand for, how we connect with our customer? And until you ask the tough questions, the first question was, there is a lot here. There's a lot to consider. It's worth it. Just start by tossing out all your assumptions, tossing out all your notions about what it is, and it's not your brand or not your logo, but your experience with the customer. I think that we use the wrong words when we have these things about branding. I think we always talk about the wrong things. The term came from a branding iron. burning the side of a cow, and it's just a mark. So we've confused it with that. We've used the wrong word when we talk about branding. It should be about bonds. Instead of brands, we should talk about bonds. And if you know how to look the customer in the eye and how to create a bond with them that lasts, an enduring value proposition where I build a brand, I ask people all the time that, have you ever changed brands of toothpaste? Dustin, have you ever changed brands of toothpaste?
No.
What kind do you use?
Crest.
Crest, that's because your mother bought you. People are brand loyal because Crest has this value proposition, and it is a bond you make over and over and over. You will not have cavities. You will not have to go to the dentist. We take care of your oral hygiene. And it is a bond, and people never change toothpaste. And you can't express it, you've never thought about it, but you will not change because there's a bond there. Great brands understand it. And whether you're a small startup or a very large company, go talk to your customer and figure out how you can establish a bond, and then branding becomes real easy. We will address the things that create and sustain that bond. And we'll have messaging that rewards them for buying Crest. We will tell them the beer they drink, the soft drinks, the restaurant, we will remind them what a great choice they make, and that's branding. So don't ask, should I brand, should I rebrand? Go make this 100% about customer experience.
That's fantastic.
Go ask questions.
I think the bond that's huge, and I think so accurate. So you make a really good point, Mark. Let's catch a couple more questions here. Where we were leaving off in the previous section, but should I respond to all customer feedback and criticism? And then we have another similar one, we kind of roll into that. I have a lot of negative online reviews from a previous owners. How should I address or fix that? Phil, do we still have you? Phil? We may have lost Phil. And we may have lost my computer as well, in case you guys are still on there. So which also means we've lost the ability to move. I will just answer the question. And what I say about getting reviews online is mostly to get more reviews. If you have really negative feedback, it's better to respond to somebody. Give them an answer and give them the opportunity to feel as though they've been heard. That, in my opinion, is the real reason people are reaching out and giving you. Sometimes they'll take it off, sometimes they won't. Most of the time when people come through and see your reviews and see that you've responded to a negative review with some type of resolution, that will give them more trust in you than if you had all 100% positive reviews. And so it's really how you address them and the fact that you do address them in some way. Go on the second one, you have a lot of negative reviews from a previous owner. I would just say it's time to continue getting reviews of the new of the new ownership, and so kind of push down the old reviews. Respond, and when I say respond here, I mean respond to the old ones, just explaining that it's under new management, you fixed a lot of it. Hopefully they're allowed to express what their concerns were and to come in and try it again and see if they don't get a different response. You might even consider writing a blog post or creating some type of content piece just so when people are searching for you that they are able to actually feel as though it's been they'll read the review but also be able to find other collateral and assets that talk specifically to that question. And so I would come up with my own collateral to address it as well and see if I can get that to rank. So where they see the review, they see a complimentary response to that as well. But other than that, it's just fix the problem, be head on with it, and do whatever you can to make sure that it doesn't continue or persist. And that's the real secret to it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Very good, very thoughtful.
And so our last question here is, which social media networks give you the best bang for your buck? It's hard to focus on all of them. That is an impossible question to answer without knowing more about the specific client. I will say from a generic understanding that LinkedIn is premium content, and so it comes at a premium price. Facebook is relatively cheaper, and then some of the niche markets that we've shown you are even cheaper. how long that will last, I'm not really sure as more and more advertisers move into those spaces, but right now a lot of them have only kicked off their advertising platforms, and so they are seeing lower costs to entry simply because they want to encourage advertisers to get in. And so that's something you're going to have to monitor, and more or less, I would say, what social media platform has your audience, and that's the one I would choose beyond the cost. And if you do it correctly, you should always maintain a positive return on investment. That's the end of our questions as well, and the end of our webinar. I'll go ahead and just close things out. I want to remind you guys that if you had any questions or anything, you can reach us at getfluid.com in our contact form. You can also reach us on our social platform on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Our Twitter handle, again, is at getfluid. You can reach Mark Hurst at Hurst Connect. Is it Connection? Hurst Connect. And that's up on your screen. We will actually swap that out for you. But then our next month is going to be a webinar on kind of a review of 2015 and what our predictions for 2016 is. So it should be a lot of fun. I actually was the person that got to predict last year, so we'll see how I did. And then try to see what is up and coming for the following year and what you might be wanting to add into your marketing strategies for 2016 as well. On behalf of my team here at Get Fluid, I want to just say thank you again for attending. I want to extend an extremely appreciative welcome to Mark Hurst. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I think this has been a hugely valuable event, and hope that you guys will continue to follow along in the future. Have a nice day.